Hello and welcome back. This is David from the Personal Finance Squad. We just finished section 2.5 where we talked about cash flows at the end of the month and as they go into the new month, which leads us into section 2.6, the master budget list. And for those of you that have been following along with all of these videos, this is kind of a milestone for us. We haven't really seen all of this on paper up to this point. So this is a very nice achievement, and I think it's going to provide a lot more clarity as we start going through further and further into creating and managing your budget. Okay, so what we want to look at is a few things here. Notice that auto payment for paying bills, there's no need for a cent column in the budget. Usually cent would be for the past, right? Meaning it would be somewhere right in here. And that's when you send things out, when you pay them in the mail. But most bills aren't done that way anymore. Again, you might pay some side bills to a doctor or a local school function, for example. But on the whole, the cent column is really not needed anymore. That was more for effect. If you choose to add that into your budget, you certainly can. I just think in most cases that's not necessary. So now we talk about due and paid columns, right? So you can get this due column here all set up, and you should, because we've talked about how to manage money and cash flows. When you have automatic payments set up, you're pretty much going to get to the point after a while where you're going to know when bills are due, or they're just going to automatically come out because your money is managed. So eventually, you're not even going to need this column, or you can, if you have your own spreadsheet, you can hide that. And in fact, you're not even going to need the paid column if you don't want it. And again, the reason is you know when money's coming out and when it's managed. Where the pay becomes the actual column. Because every time you put an actual in, there was something pushed against it, right? So if the mortgage is $861, you're going to know that's coming out in the 15th automatically. Spending money, that's going to be several times throughout the month, and so you just take money out as it comes. So I've shown these two columns for effect, and again, it's your choice of how you want to manage it, but really you're going to get to a point where you're just going to need these three columns. So if we look a little bit here, we haven't really seen Jasper's income thrown into the expenses list or to be built out to the size that it is right now. And you can see that it's pretty lengthy. So Jasper gets paid bi-weekly, right? So we know $22.39 is what he gets for each check. Now, just since we're talking about it, in the scenario where he has 2 months a year where he gets the third check, check 3 would go right here at $22.39. Now, when that actually happens, that $22.39 is not going to be applied to anything unless you're choosing to do that. If you want to hold it aside in your supplemental or a savings of some sort because it's your money, that's what you choose to do. That's what I end up doing. But for purposes of the money coming at this point, you're going to shift it off somewhere. So you're going to need to add another line somewhere in here, right? You'd have to say, you know, extra check or something to that effect. So again, we can see that Jasper has his basic 2 checks, and they total to $44.78. And we always talk about having income match expenses, right? Because we have the goal of hitting 0. So remain equals $44.78. Let's say for everything in the project column, the remain column is going to have the same number. And that's why they match. You'll see right here, which we haven't established yet, which we will in other exercises, is that as we go through the month, at some point or another, these checks are going to get deposited, or other checks could get deposited. Maybe your grandmother sends you $35 and you cash that check. Then you'd have a grandma, something like that, at $50 or something. So you're always going to have money coming in, and you're always going to have this in account to play with. Again, we'll see this in other exercises, but figuratively speaking, if Jasper had his first check come in, this would be gone. This would be $22.39 yet to deposit. And then in account would be in effect 2239. And that again would equal a subtotal of 4478. So what happens then, as the subtotal, we'll work off this last piece. So whatever's left and remain, so as numbers go down, so if you pay actual $100 here, this would be 0, right? Well, that means the remain column would go down to 4378, and you'll still be at 0 because this was knocked off and this was knocked off, so they're both reduced by $100, and again at this point you'd have a balance of 0. So I just wanted to show some quick scenarios of how this budget would look and how money would come in and out, and it's how you manage it. And again, we'll get ourselves into further exercises based on this subject. Okay, what we also see here is that we have supplemental account, and we talked about this in a couple other exercises where we see 3 items here for Jasper totaling $35. In a sense, these savings vehicles are supplemental, and perhaps we'll just change this as we go through and just call it supplemental. This is just the way, though, I'm putting other to break it out. And as you can see here, they don't have due dates. Even if you're not tracking them, eventually you're going to know what you pay and what you don't, as we've already spoke about in terms of an actual bill due date. These doctor's appointments, memberships, haircut, life insurance. In fact, life insurance should read differently. Life insurance should be an automatic payment in most cases. It's not like you send a check somewhere. It comes out of an account. But haircut, memberships, doctor appointments, that could be miscellaneous. And again, you can break it out the way you want it. Maybe memberships go down to supplement. Budgets are always modified and changed, sometimes really on a monthly basis, because we've already talked about having other forms of income coming in, and so it needs to be maintained. This is budget maintenance. That's what this chapter is all about. Okay, so we're going to go a little further into what I was just doing, showing some scenarios. So we talked about this right here. We have the spending line item. We've been calling them interchangeably with leftovers. So here's 2 ways to do it. Here's the spending line item as a whole, which is the $703. And the options are to only subtract the money from the spending when the transaction does not apply to another item in the spreadsheet. That's just your marker of knowing, hey, again, once you know your budget pretty well, you're going to go, I'm going to buy a surfboard. Well, there's nothing in your budget that's a surfboard, so you know what's coming out of spending money. So now when tracking these spending items, we have projected and actual columns filled in simultaneously, right? Just like any other bill. Now, it just it just depends on, again, how you want to do this. You can either track your spending in a separate spreadsheet that looks like this, or as money comes out, again, knowing that anything you purchase does not apply to anything in this budget, you're just going to keep taking out actuals as you go. So we can see $135 has come out, remaining of $568. So if Jasper goes out and buys coffee, gets a bra for the front of his car, it could be anything. He's just going to keep adding numbers. So if he spent $68 in floor mats, this number is going to be $500. And I have to say that, again, this is all an optional thing the way you want to do it. If you need more discipline, you should have a separate spreadsheet to do that. In my particular case, I don't do that. I just keep hitting up the actual number on what it is, and you get a gauge of what I have, what I have left. That's what I say to myself. That's what I say to my wife. So you can also see here that we put a couple other pieces where first of all, we already pretty much went through this already in terms of seeing Jasper's income come in. We talked about having other forms of income, so we see a rebate check. Perhaps he bought something and he didn't incorporate it. He just said, hey, I bought the dishwasher, for example, at $400, and I took it out last month and paid for it with spending money or something to that effect, and I have a rebate check. So he's pretty much paying himself back a little bit later, not thinking about this rebate check. However, it's income, so he needs to add it. And by doing this, it increases the to deposit to $200 or $22.89. Now we talked about in account, right? So we know that this check's already gone, and that means based on the expenses that he's already incurring, his in account balance gets lower. So this is going to fluctuate several times throughout the month, as with the subtotal, of course. And every time you make a transaction in the budget, the remain column is going to change. So at this point, Jasper has 30 bucks ahead of his goal, and that's because of a few reasons, and we'll show you on this page in a second. Now we see bowling. We see that Jasper went and he spent $38 and he was $17 under. He also paid his home phone, and that came in at $13 under. And of course, we've already talked about the current spending money. So at the current state, you can see that there's, again, always a balance. So when these dollars came out, it reduced the in account, and then the remains the remain. So it's just always reflected in here. That means that money's still there to pay. So for example, if Jasper only spent $700 at the end of the month and 3 left over, he'd actually will have a gain, right? He could do whatever he wants with that money. He could save it. He could carry it over to the next month or what have you. So again, these are all active numbers. They're always going to fluctuate. Now we get down to contacts. Contact lenses is what we're referring to here, and this is an unexpected item. So Jasper decided to add a line item that he just wanted to handle this payment within his given budget for the month. So you can see they were $20 immediately when he bought them. They were paid for, and he reflected it out of the bank account. So where the gain loss comes in at 30 is that there was the rebate check. I'll just abbreviate at $50. So that's an additional on top of his budget that wasn't accounted for. So that's an additional $50 that's of income. And then he had the contact lenses that are $20. So at this point, this is why you see that Jasper has $30 of a gain at this particular point in time. So we're going to end here for this video at section 2.6. Roll down here a little bit and we can already see that we're going to get into section 2.7, inflow and outflow scenarios in the budget, and we're going to go through and actually see the effects, what happens when you actually remove money in and out rather than just drawing on it. You're going to see how a debit and a credit handle each other and handle that cash flow budget. And again, this will make things more and more clear in reality to, again, you being successful and really managing your budget successfully. So thanks for joining this video, and we will see you in section 2.7.